Hello everybody, Glass Half Dead here, talking to you today about Atlantic City Open, ACO, which took place last weekend, assuming I get this video out on time. Our first in-person tournament in a very long time. There were exactly 29 players, and out of 25 potential factions that could have been taken, only 12 were represented. 8 of the 29 were Necrons, and a further 8 were some form of updated in Pariah Nexus Marine. But how did this heavily skewed tournament actually play out? Just how broken and overpowered are the new Marines? Well, we're about to find out. Let's dig into the results and have a little think about how we could go about diversifying the field. Why some were taken more than others, and what would have performed well but wasn't there. But very quickly, if you're a subscriber to my channel, I would like to give you a big double hello. Very wholesome, very pleasant. That's exactly on brand for me, I think we can all agree. If you would like to get yourself a double hello in the next video, it's subscribers only, so subscribe right now and it's all yours. Alongside 16 players being a Pariah Nexus faction, there were 3 Drukhari players and 2 Death Guard players. The other 8 players were all the only player for their faction. Now here I'm mainly going to be looking at the top 8, but outside of the top 8, I would like to note that although Necrons and Marines dominated, there are actually no completely overpowered and broken Marines in that top 8. In fact, their highest placement was 9th. And do note that I'm lumping both Vanilla Marines and Death Watch in the same boat here, so when I say Marines, I mean both of them. I will go into a few more specifics later on. Let's start with the placements though, shall we? 1st, 2nd and 4th were all Necrons. 3rd place was Tau. To my mind, everyone that is in the top 4 is equal. An extra turn of the dice could have easily shuffled that order of 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th. So I don't really want to say 1st is actually better than 2nd, 3rd or 4th, even though it technically is. It's pretty random. Thanks for downvoting me, whoever just did that. Fair enough. Not going to argue. All I'm saying is I personally wouldn't read too much into the specifics of the podium placement positions. 5th, 6th, 7th and 8th were Orks, Astra Militarum, Death Guard and Drukhari respectively. So let's run our way up from the bottom. That's what she said. That doesn't make sense. That's what I said. Let's do it. Drukhari first. It was a dual roster able to run both Cabalites that are ignoring obscurity when they shoot, and also Racks with classic rack spam. That probably blew the mic out. My bad. I'll contain my rage, I apologise. And then he could swap in the Dark Lance or the Splinter Rifle depending on what he was up against. Although I suspect, let's be honest, we all know, he went Dark Lance. If you have access to a Dark Lance, you go Dark Lance. You never don't take Dark Lance. Don't fight me on that one, seriously. Now I personally always say that if I wanted to go to a tournament and have like my best possible chance of winning, Drukhari are the faction that I would take. I think they're so strong, and this guy's running what I would consider to be a standard, very strong, very difficult to handle list, focusing on mercenaries to allow him to flex into whatever sort of build he needs. This is the exact paradigm I would expect any strong Drukhari player to play, and he did. He came 8th. Don't know what went wrong there, but dice happen. If you want to know more about Drukhari, I've left a link to a beginner's guide along with a few competitive lists in the top comment. 7th was Death Guard, and they're running a pretty standard Death Guard list. Max fighters and gunners on the roster, and then just spam with Poxwalkers. Has the option to deep strike a Blight Lord, which I suspect on this particular Kill Team Championship pack, where I know that they were playing with the actual Kill Team Championship recommended terrain layouts, he probably used deep strike quite often here, because there's a lot of terrain, and it's going to be very hard for the Death Guard to move across the board. So he probably used the Deep Strike, the Blight Lord a lot, I would hypothesize. Now with this particular roster, he's obviously taking a lot of Poxwalkers every game, and they just immediately give up the Kill 1 primary. Not a negative, most teams do, you know, there's very few teams that don't just give it up, but something to consider. Very much a hazard of the job when it comes to Death Guard in any sort of tournament where there is a Kill 1 or Kill more primary. I generally like Death Guard. I think they're very forgiving for new players and for, you know, to lighten the cognitive load on advanced players as well. So good to see them in the top 8. Nice. If you want to know more about Death Guard, I've left a link to a beginner's guide that has a lot of competitive rosters in the top comment again. 6th brings us Astra Militarum or Imperial Guard. Both valid names, fight me. Super strong faction, but in my opinion, second to Drukhari. Drukhari, OP, Astra Militarum, kind of OP. Basically, there's less flexibility in unit roles, so if you get a bad matchup, there's less you can do. They ran this as Catachan, where basically the only model that's actually getting any use of that is Gottfried, who, don't forget, this is a pack where we're getting +1 to the power swords for every faction, which means Gottfried in Catachan is now strength 5. Typically, I would say Catachan is a really good choice for guard. However, I think that with the LVO terrain in mind, as mentioned earlier, a lot of doors, a lot of corridors, a lot of terrain, I think Talon has a real place there. Also Valhallan, always a solid pick as well, so that you don't fail as many morale tests as God I want to do. He had a pretty standard roster of Flamers on the one hand, Plasma on the other. He decided not to go for the kind of, you know, funky fun Blackstone Guard list, which I think has real play. It's a shame he didn't love that Rheinraus combo, but whatever. I will say I am becoming more and more skeptical of Pius Vaughn. I don't think that's an auto take. That's all I'm saying. Gottfried, yes, Rheinraus, super fun and powerful in the right hands. Pius Vaughn, don't know. Also in this pack, on this particular roster, there was a great pick, which is using the Catachan to its fullest, giving a power sword to a regular sergeant, who's then getting 2 attacks, again at strength 5. That's really good. And a great candidate for fighting twice, because he's not your leader. He could be a zealot. This particular build I consider an auto take in any Catachan list you're running. Seriously. They're both absolute terrors. 5th is Shane with Orks, or is it Ryan? Nobody knows the difference. If you want to see what kind of man we're dealing with here though, check out the top comment where you can see him and me discussing how to play demons, both for beginners and competitively, with a bunch of competitive roster discussion, linked in the top comment. He ran Death Skulls, which most people will consider to be for the 6-up invulnerable save. However, I suspect he mainly relied on this to give him rerolls for consistency. He was going with a pretty elite knob list with his Orks as opposed to the standard boy spam. He's going for being very killy with this roster, so being able to reroll a single wound and a single hit roll is actually really useful in this knob list. Knob heavy doesn't really work at 100, but at 125 it has some real legs, especially with this level of Kill Team Championship terrain. It's a thing he's been championing for a while now, and I'm glad to see it place top 8. And hey, if you want to know more about Orks, check out me talking with Emmanuel. I've left a link to a beginner's guide with a lot of competitive tournament roster discussion in the top comment. 4th is Necrons, and I'm actually going to skip talking about this until we have the big Necron talk. Needless to say, they were Necrons. But you know what? If you want to know more about Necrons, check the top comment where I've left a link to a beginner's guide that also has a little bit of competitive roster discussion. Top comment, yeah! 3rd is Tau, and they've taken a very standard shield drone rail rifle spam list. Not much to say about this. Honestly, due to, the Kill Team Championship terrain, fly is amazing. Both Tau and Harlequins do really, really well on this terrain. So I don't have much to add to that. I think we all know how Tau deal with this kind of thing. But what I will add, very important, is if you check the top comment, I've left a link to a beginner's guide that also has competitive roster discussion. Top comment, yeah! I need to do less content, so I have to link less things. And then, as already mentioned, 2nd and 1st were also Necrons. So with the positions done, let's have ourselves a little dive into Necrons and Marines. Starting with Necrons, of course, as they were the ones actually winning. First things first are sub-factions, because there were literally only 2. 8 Necron players, 2 sub-factions. Diversity. The new sub-faction, Zerakan, and the old sub-faction, Novok. There was nothing else on the board. However, this is still double the number of sub-factions that Necrons used to play, so thumbs up. 2 thumbs up, in fact. The Novok list still had an insane amount of Flayed One spam, with their outrageously strong Lich Guard backup. The Zerakan lists, meanwhile, actually looked interesting. Combined arms, plenty of death marks, immortals, even some Praetorians. These featured on most rosters, and as just mentioned, with both Harlequins and Tau being very good in Kill Team Championship because of the terrain, anything with fly, very strong, like Praetorians in fact. They certainly have utility, but do they have enough utility to make up whatever it is, 28 points? No, I personally don't think so, to be entirely honest with you. Were they actually being used, or were they just on the rosters to kind of, you know, fake people out? I don't know. You don't really need to fake people out with Necrons. You can just win. You know, you've got options. You can do one or the other, I guess. Honestly, that's kind of it. There's not much more to say about Necrons. That's what they did. It seems to have worked for them very well. With so many T5 units, you're just able to stay on the board. And of course, reanimation protocols, you're staying on the board. Now, Necrons took 3 spaces in the top 4, and their lowest scoring player was 19th. A very strong faction. Now we come to Marines, who had a very different showing for their first outing post-Pariah Nexus. The best placement was actually 9th, with the lowest 29th, because that's out of 29, if you forgot. Once again, note that I'm linking both Astartes and Deathwatch, as they were the 2 factions that got the biggest boosts here, with regular dudes going to 2 wounds, etc. They have access to so many of the same units that it's hard not to think of these 2 factions as being combined, but of course they do have pretty big significant difference. Deathwatch simply don't have the key to what Astartes do, which is survivability, which is death denied, especially in this 3CP pack. If you don't have the damage mitigation, an elite team cannot reliably do well. Yes, they can kill, but if you're dead, killing doesn't matter. Pro tip. In fact, the Astartes specifically had their lowest placing at 23rd, but that guy was Raven Guard, and so clearly was there to have fun, not to be competitive. Therefore, he's the real winner of the day. Because honestly, lol at that sub-faction, right? Jesus. Whereas the highest Deathwatch player, apart from one that was at 10th, was 20th. So 20th to 29th was packed with Deathwatch. That's not good. Anyway, the 9th and 11th placing Astartes lists were both running Blood Angels. An interesting choice, I've got to be honest. Very good at killing, but this game isn't really about killing. Just throwing that out there. You know, it's about movement. It's about white scars. People forget, but they shouldn't. They shouldn't. The 9th player had no Primaris at all, whilst the 11th player was mostly Primaris. A lot of Assault Intercessors and a Blade Guard veteran for a leader. Honestly, with only 2 places in the positioning between them, I'd consider them to have placed the same. Again, like I feel with the top 4, the difference between 9th and 11th is next to nothing. It's a roll of the dice. It's who did you go up against in your first round. Now, the 10th placement Deathwatch was actually pretty much what you'd expect from a pre-Pariah Nexus list. A lot of Deathwatch veterans, just obviously missing the frag cannon, right? Because that's terrible now. With 2 wounds, you've still got 2 attacks, you're doing good stuff with the Deathwatch veterans. You don't need to dip into the Primaris for Deathwatch, although you can if you really want to grab a T5 for some reason. Very honestly, for the Deathwatch who don't get the death denied, losing the frag cannon is actually a really big deal. It's gonna sound crazy. Yes, they all get 2 wounds now, so they are inherently more durable, but man, I probably... Losing the frag cannon is a big deal, that's all I'm gonna say. Okay, so wrapping up, the Marines are completely OP. That's overpowered, in case you don't know, but they didn't place. The traditional explanation at this point would be that there weren't any good players playing them, right? I mean, that's an easy one. Just latch on to that reason. Any faction is only as good as its best player, right? Except we know that, for example, Janice was playing. She placed 11th. We know that she regularly podiums and has done so before with Azayani and Death Guard. So she knows what she's doing. So we can't just say all the players were bad. So what actually happened to overpowered Marines? Was the community wrong and they're not overpowered? No, sir. No, the community is never wrong. Are you trying to tell me the Marines are overrated? Is it possible that somebody recently made a video where they said exactly that? No, I don't think so. Definitely not. It's possible that they are running a realistic list of only 7 models, and therefore are too elite to be reliable. It's possible that everybody fell into the trap of thinking that kills mattered, not movement. As mentioned, nobody was running White Scars, that OP faction. It's possible that the KTC Kill Team Championship terrain simply doesn't favour their style of play, and it certainly is a very dense board most of the time. Apart from like one map where it's a completely open board, it's horrifying. Okay, my final word on it, guys, before we get to the hobby update, but unless you were having an oversight of every single game, we may never know what happened to the grand scouring of the marine meta at ACO Atlantic City Open. I suspect it's because Marines are lame. Okay everybody, thank you very much for watching to the end of this video. I had wanted to get this out earlier, but honestly I was feeling pretty depressed. And I just couldn't bring myself to stand in front of the camera. Yeah, woo! Mental health. Suck my balls. Anyway, so thank you for watching all the way to the end. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you're still, or beginning to, depending on what kind of champ you are, enjoying the presentation style. I don't know if the green screen is working at the moment, because I'm recording this at a weird time, so the only thing I'm getting is this horrifying uplighting. I'm not going to fix that in post. I guarantee the green screen's just been terrible on this video. Sorry, I will work on it. As I will work on my life, as we all must. But if you've made it this far into the video, I'd like to thank you very much. I'd like to give you a big triple hello. Thank you. Seriously, a small channel like mine, I'm still trying to figure out what my channel really is, even though it's been going for 3 years. Weird, I know. Anyway, hobby update. What's going on with me? Well, a big thing about my hobby is that it's mainly my channel. The only reason I play as much Warhammer as I do is because I want to put it on my channel. I want to talk about it. I want to have a purpose in my life. I want to have a reason. I want to have a meaning. I want to have a reason that when people... So me and Birinid are going to start a podcast. I know people have wanted, you know, when I was doing my interview series, to do like a Glass Half Dead podcast where you could just go download it. But we're going to do a podcast title, still working on it, haven't figured it out yet. Something like morale test or breaking morale. I don't know, you know, something about general, you know, not being good at something. And it's kind of going to be both of us doing our journey into 40k. I already mentioned that I'm going to be doing like me having a little beginning 40k series on here, but that's going to be like very edited. It's going to be, you know, 8-minute 1-second videos like this, you know, presentation. It's going to be, I know the facts because I've looked into it and I tell you the facts, whereas the podcast is going to be way more free form, as podcasts tend to be. It's going to be us bantering. I don't have banter because I don't really... You know, I'm definitely the straight man. I'm the foil in any sort of relationship. I don't really make jokes. Anyway, for 40k, I just played my first game with Imperial Guard. That was fun. It was 1,000 points, and I took 4 tanks. My opponent just didn't have an answer for tanks. Like, it was a little bit, like, conceded turn 3. Yeah, a bit of a downer, really, because he just didn't have anything. So it was a bit of a non-game. He had kind of one unit that could do anything, and I killed it, and then that was it. I also just picked up the Sisters Codex. I don't really know why. When I'm depressed, I buy more stuff. You know, I've just tried to clear out a whole load of stuff with eBay. They suspended my account, by the way. 2 grand of all the stuff I've sold, like 60 auctions, 2 grand suspended. That's probably, I mean, you know, that's getting to me. Anyway, thanks for watching. Hope you've had a good day. Continue to have a good day. I'm cutting this short right now. Rock on, buddy.